With a name as unique as Dakoda Armstrong and a NASCAR career that lasted as long as his did, it's rather remarkable that he's become forgotten about so quickly. Dakoda Armstrong was a staple of the Truck and Xfinity series throughout the 2010s, but was never able to reach victory lane or even contend for any wins. But for better or for worse, he was certainly consistent, so when you factor in his equipment and expectations, you have to wonder, was he really that bad? Following success in karting and midget racing, Dakoda attracted an offer from Penske Racing to join their development program back in 2009 when he was 18 years old. While he never drove for Penske directly, this spot in their development program landed him a ride with the Dodge-affiliated Cunningham Motorsports team in ARCA. In 6 starts with them and a one-off with Venturini Motorsports earlier in the season, Armstrong fared respectably with a P3 at Salem and 2 other top 10 finishes. Naturally, it was soon decided that he would put together a full-time rookie campaign with Cunningham in 2010. His first 4 races looked pretty rocky, but in the 5th race at Talladega, Armstrong not only won his first career pole, but he went on to lead 38 of the 94 laps en route to his first career win.
Huge laps make the right decisions here, and Dakota's got to run. Patrick Sheltra, that's going to be big.
With all that damage. One other thing that they're going to have to factor in, there are 4 cars in front of this lead pack that are lap down cars. They're going to catch them. What will they do when they get up to them? 4 and 5 wide, coming out of turn 2 down the backstretch.
Watch Enfinger now. See him all the way to the outside. He's been against the yellow line since the restart. Now he's at the outside because that's where the 55 car went.
He's doing a fabulous job with his mirror, which is his job to do.
3 wide, 4 wide, coming out of turn 4 and into the tri-oval. Here they come to the slower lap traffic. Enfinger in front of Steve Arpin. When they come to the stripe, it'll be the final lap. 1 lap to go from Talladega. Enfinger in front.
Right now, it's Enfinger's job to keep the 55 behind him. He has no control if they get 3 or 4 wide. He's got to keep the closest car behind him. Right now, Dakoda has a run on the outside.
Dakoda Armstrong, the strong car, coming out onto the backstretch. They're moving back and forth, jockeying for position as they go down the backstretch.
Look at Hessert on the inside.
Craig Ghost gives Tom Hessert a shove. Hessert looking to get by the 22. Now problems. The 55 of Arpin spins.
Coulter gets turned around.
No caution flag as of yet. The field making their way into the tri-oval. They still don't throw the yellow. It's going to be the 22. Dakoda Armstrong coming out of the tri-oval will win at Talladega.
Patrick Shelter, with all that damage to his car, comes home in second.
The caution now comes out. It was the 55 that got sideways in 3 and 4.
Over the rest of his rookie year, Dakoda recorded 2 wins, the other coming later on at Salem, along with 5 total top 5s and 12 total top 10s. But due to an average finish of 9.2, which is pretty mediocre by ARCA standards, he was never a threat for the championship, and only wound up 7th overall, right in front of Joey Coulter and right behind the now Trackhouse Racing owner Justin Marks. Nevertheless, he set himself apart from the young, wreck-prone ARCA driver stereotype as he only crashed out of 1 race, the season opener at Daytona. Having clearly demonstrated that he could both win races and take good care of his equipment, it's no surprise that come 2011, one of the better Truck Series teams, Thor Sport Racing, signed Dakoda on part-time to drive the number 98 truck. Additionally, he would rejoin Cunningham Motorsports in ARCA, but this time only for a select few races. Overall, he failed to impress in trucks with only 1 top 10 finish in 7 attempts, but after getting another ARCA win under his belt at Winchester and posting just 1 crash-related DNF out of all of his races that season, Thor Sport decided to bring him on full-time for 2012. Also influencing that decision was Dakoda's full sponsorship from Everfied.com. Prior to 2012, Dakoda received consistent sponsorship from a company called Feral Gas, but in many of his earlier ARCA races, including his win at Talladega, he was completely unsponsored. So what I'm getting at is that Dakoda was not a paid driver, not to my knowledge at least, so he wasn't just getting these opportunities handed to him. Regardless of that, the performance still wasn't there for the driver of the number 98 Toyota, really at all. In fact, it took until the 12th race of the season at Michigan for Dakoda to score his first top 10, a 3rd place via fuel mileage. While that at least somewhat set the team in the right direction, after his next two races resulted in finishes outside the top 20, ThorSport made the call to cancel Dakoda's contract once his sponsor fell through. Over the rest of that year, he was only able to string together one more race in the Truck Series with Turner Motorsports of Kentucky, but unfortunately engine failure would cause his day to end prematurely. So on one hand, Dakoda was still doing a good job at keeping his trucks in one piece with just 2 crashes, but on the other hand, a 19.4 place average finish for a top team like ThorSport Racing is simply not enough, sponsorship or no sponsorship. Luckily for the 2013 season, Dakoda was able to organize full sponsorship yet again, this time from Winfield, a company that would end up staying loyal to him over the next few years. So while his performance with ThorSport didn't help his case at landing a new ride, his new sponsorship definitely did. Plus, he'd clearly shown potential in ARCA. With that said, Turn 1 Racing offered Armstrong a spot in their number 60 truck full-time for 2013. Turn 1 was developing into a rather competitive truck team back in 2011 with rookie Red Bull Racing prospect Cole Witt giving them a pull, 2 top 5s, and 11 top 10s. But after his departure to go Nationwide Series Racing in 2012, the team was left with very little funding and had to scale back to only part-time competition. Now with Armstrong's full season sponsorship, they were once again able to run the full schedule and would hopefully be able to pick up right where they left off in 2011. But Dakoda would end up nearly matching his results from his rookie year with just 1 top 5 and 3 top 10s, and also I might add that the lone top 5 was from this finish in the Talladega race.
Here comes that 98 and the 88 tandem in the middle of the track. Johnny Sauter, he won at Daytona earlier this year. Can he do it again? They wreck behind him. They're rolling behind him. Now the 88 spins. ThorSport is going to win. It's going to be Johnny Sauter that will get the win, but they wreck behind him.
Matt Crafton has not got to the start-finish line yet.
And they're still wrecking. Crafton does slide by the start-finish line. The 32 of Miguel Paludo was upside down. It's on fire now.
So all props to Dakoda for being able to avoid that utter carnage, but what I'm getting at is the number 60 team was a textbook mid-pack team that year. They never came remotely close to winning a race and never even ran the top 10 consistently throughout an entire race. The one thing the team did have going for them, though, was their consistency in general, or more so just Dakoda's clean driving, because over the entire season, they did not retire from a single race. In the Truck Series especially, that is just short of a miracle, and was apparently enough reason for Richard Petty Motorsports to bring him on full-time to their Nationwide Series program the next year. This would not be Dakoda's first venture into the series, as he had already raced there 7 times, 5 of which came in 2013 for Richard Childress Racing. His nationwide results were pretty much par for the course to how he was doing in the Truck Series, with a best finish of 13th and an average finish of 20.3. And quite honestly, in 2014, while driving for Richard Petty's team, not much changed. He still stayed clear of the mayhem, as he once again had no crash-related DNFs, and he finished all but 1 race under power, but his average finish only amounted to a 20.2, and he only scored 3 top 10s. For a team that only 2 years ago boasted 6 top 5s and 17 top 10s with Michael Annett, it was pretty clear that Armstrong was not holding his own weight. Regardless, with Winfield still on board for all of his races, Richard Petty Motorsports decided to bring him back for the 2015 season with a new crew chief, Frank Kerr. However, the crew chief was evidently not the issue, because Dakoda actually took a step back in performance that year, only finishing in the top 10 1 time. His average finish went up by just a tick to a 19.7, and as always, he was remarkably consistent throughout the season, but at that point, it was clear that Dakoda was not Cup Series material, and truthfully was not deserving of another year with Richard Petty Motorsports. The next year, still with a near full sponsorship from Winfield, he was able to hop on with one of the smaller teams in this series, JGL Racing. Behind the wheel of their number 28 car, Armstrong failed to get a single top 10, and I don't want to sound too repetitive here, but he did not crash out of a single race and only went behind the wall once due to electrical issues at Talladega. Notice I say he didn't get a top 10 in the 28 car though, because he did end the season with 1 top 10. That finish came in the second Iowa race, the US Cellular 250, thanks to a one-off opportunity with Gibbs Racing. This would be the first time Dakoda competed in top-level equipment since his select starts with RCR back in 2013. And at this stage in his career, he really needed to make the most of it if he wanted to be taken seriously as a competitor. Furthermore, that season, the number 18 Gibbs Racing car, which he was set to pilot, had won half, 9 of the 18 races thus far between 3 different drivers, so this time it was very clear what the expectations for him were. Qualifying went as well as possible for the JGR camp, with their full-time drivers of Daniel Suarez and Erik Jones timing in first and second, and Armstrong placing right behind them in third. But no matter how fast the JGR cars were set up, they would be in for a challenge against a tough field that, in addition to all the series regulars, included Brad Keselowski in the Penske Racing 22, Sam Hornish Jr. in the Richard Childress number 2, and late model racer Josh Berry in the Junior Motorsports number 88. Even Drew Herring, the fill-in driver for JGL Racing's 28 car, showed that he could be a threat after qualifying in an impressive 9th place. At the start of the race, Erik Jones would quickly take charge from the outside lane and lead the opening lap over Suarez. Suarez hung tight in second, however Armstrong began steadily dropping back. He eventually settled out around the rear of the top 10, and following the final caution at lap 150, he restarted all the way back in 13th. But over the course of the near 100-lap green flag run to the finish, Armstrong finally found his rhythm and began picking off drivers one by one. While all the spotlights were focused on the intense battle for the win between Erik Jones and Ty Dillon, Armstrong's steady climb up through the field led to a very solid 5th-place finish. So while the finish was in Armstrong's favor, the facts were that he barely held on to a top 10 for the majority of the race and arguably the best car in the field. And even worse for his image, his fill-in Drew Herring ran right behind him, and even ahead of him at times, en route to a 12th place finish, which tied the 28 team's best finish that season. All in all, Dakoda failed to perform when it mattered most, and his below-average run for Joe Gibbs Racing standards certainly did not entice any other big team to take a chance on him in the future. Anyway, heading into 2017, Dakoda was still nearly fully backed by Winfield, and JGL Racing was not in a position to pass up those sponsorship dollars, so the team and driver would reunite for a second season. For around the first half of that year, the results were much the same for Armstrong, average but consistent, with a best finish of 12th and a worst of 22nd in the first 13 races. But finally, in the 14th round of Xfinity Series competition, the American Ethanol E15 250 at Iowa, he would score his first top 10 and top 5 finish for JGL. That race ended up to be the perfect storm for Armstrong and all underdogs alike, as multiple front-runners, including the dominant driver of the race Christopher Bell, were all caught up in incidents throughout the day. Furthermore, because the crash that took out Bell fell towards the end of green flag pit stops, multiple other contenders such as Justin Allgaier and Daniel Hemrick would become trapped off the lead lap. Well, normally they could have just taken the wave around, but in this case they weren't eligible to. Why, you might ask? Well, that's because the other JGL Racing driver, Dylan Lupton, who had not yet completed his green flag pit stop, just decided to take one for the team and stay out under caution. Of course, Lupton immediately plummeted back on the restart, but as luck would have it for him, the caution came out just a few laps later after an already damaged Ryan Reed got into the wall. With only 10 to go on the final restart and very few competitive teams left in contention, Armstrong was able to make the most of these unusual circumstances and bring home a very impressive 5th place finish. And the story goes on. The next week at Daytona, for the running of the Coca-Cola Firecracker 250, Dakoda played the passive strategy to perfection, hanging in the back for most of the race and avoiding crashes before charging up to the front late in the going. On the overtime restart, he lined up 5th on the inside lane, and thanks to the leader of the outside lane, Erik Jones, running out of fuel and holding up the whole lane, Dakoda was able to hold a straight line to pull into 3rd, right behind the leader William Byron. Then, just as the field was approaching the overtime line on the backstretch, the 0 car of Garrett Smithley got hooked into the outside wall and collected many others behind him. But since the leader had already crossed the overtime line before the caution had come out, the race was made official and Dakoda was credited with 3rd place, tying his best career NASCAR finish. And it wasn't just a great race for Dakoda, but for JGL Racing as a whole, as their 24 car driven by Jeb Burton finished 1 spot behind in 4th, and their 3rd car, the number 26 of Scott Lagasse Jr., finished a still solid 14th place. After that, Armstrong's results returned back to the usual, averaging around 20th place finishes, although he did manage to score one more top 10, a P10 at Mid-Ohio later that season. But unfortunately, following the 27th round at Kentucky, he was released from JGL Racing due to a lack of sponsorship. See, while Winfield still sponsored the vast majority of Dakota's races over the past 2 years, they had scaled back a slight bit, and the team was unable to find any company to take their place, leaving the 28 machines sponsorless for 8 races in 2016 and 6 so far in 2017. However, those unsponsored races weren't even the driving factor in Dakota's termination, but rather that according to an ESPN article from the time, Winfield was failing to make payments. So despite the recent improvement in Dakota's on-track performance, with JGL already struggling to field full-time cars, and with Dakota's only sponsor not holding up their end of the deal, there was simply no other decision than to release him. Now going into 2018 completely sponsorless and with no major signs of potential, Dakoda was unable to secure a full-time or even part-time ride ever again. So for my final thoughts, and to answer the question of this video, yes, I do believe that Dakoda Armstrong was just as bad as people remember. Or at least in terms of his results, because he underperformed significantly for ThorSport Racing in his rookie truck season, and couldn't consistently put together good runs or even somewhat challenge for any wins in 2 seasons with Richard Petty Motorsports in the Nationwide Series. By the time he finally began to show promise for JGL Racing in 2017, it was already too late, and he still wasn't setting the world on fire by any means. But in terms of just general consistency, Dakoda was in a class of his own. Throughout his entire NASCAR career of 6 near full-time seasons, he only crashed out of 5 total races. Furthermore, he never posted a single DNF due to a crash at all with JGL Racing, and only failed to finish one of his 12 Xfinity Series Super Speedway races. And the reason he retired early in that one was due to electrical issues. Those are pretty much unprecedented numbers, and I feel very confident saying that Dakoda Armstrong was one of the cleanest drivers in NASCAR history. Because of that alone, I think he deserved a spot in NASCAR, specifically with underfunded teams like JGL Racing, who simply needed a driver who they could count on to take care of their equipment. But no matter how clean he was, he would still need to find sponsorship and a lot of it to continue racing, and that is where he ultimately fell short. But that's all I've got to say for today's video. Thank you all very much for watching, and if you did enjoy it, please make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more videos just like these. We're honestly well within sight of 1,000 subs at this point, which is pretty insane to me considering I just started this channel back in November, so thanks again to all my new subs for that. Also, make sure to let me know any video suggestions you guys have or any drivers you want to see in this series in the future. I do actually read those, and I made this episode over Dakoda Armstrong because of a comment I saw a while back. But yeah, that's about it. So until next time, peace out.